what makes something a story, ultimately? Is it a narrative? Is it a personality that's in there?
Miles.
Yes. So you're a little bit on the other side.
I could spin stories all day long. Well, my perception of a story is something that is relevant to the times, that what's going on now. Not the New York Times, but the times. Maybe relevant to New York Times. And something that kind of comes out of left field that makes you go, wow, that's kind of cool. I haven't heard of that before. And as a PR guy, what you find is that you have clients who think just because they did something different that morning that it's news. And you're under the gun to, get that out there. And there's the fine balance of pleasing your client and not looking like an ass in front of reporters. So the daily struggle there is to create something that is tangible and that has substance, that does not, create a third strike for you, that can pique the interest of a journalist, that they can think, wow, this is something that, I can run with. But it gets more complex than that, in that when we talk about building relationships, these guys are all looking for something that the other guy doesn't have. So you have to play your cards in a certain way, and one of the more, I can vent over this. Yeah. One of the more frustrating things that I encounter, is okay, this is a perfect story for X, Y, Z at the New York Times. I'm going to send it on over, see what they think. And they don't get back to you, right? And they don't like phone calls, so you respect that. And you wait and you wait and you wait, and then you move on. And then maybe you can sell the story down the line, but then you're playing second fiddle with somebody else, and then you might hear from the guy later on, how come you don't, how come you didn't think about me first? And you're like, well, I did. There's the ongoing battle of just like how to pick a target and how to land a story. I don't think there's a silver bullet in any of this, except for relationships. How does that sound?
I couldn't help notice, Miles, when you said that when you couldn't sell a story to the New York Times, you'd go down the line and you kind of looked at me. And I think I won't take that personally. But if that is the case, just don't tell me you tried to sell it to the New York Times first. Or maybe tell me and say, aha, I'm going to really embarrass Jesse for turning that story down. I actually sometimes do, as I told Mike, I don't like to see a story. I read the Business Times religiously every week and usually bury my head in my hands because, they've got stuff that, I didn't have. But I'll somehow, if I can advance it in some ways, I find the Business Times, I find other papers to be actually an asset. And if I can, quote, add value, shall we say, to a story that's already appeared elsewhere, I'll definitely do that. Some of the things that appeal to me, again, is sort of some of the things I've said, and what Miles has said is sort of like a little bit of humor. Personality is really good. So I don't know if anybody else had fun, but I guess that according to the New York Times, our energy secretary, Stephen Chu, apparently has a sort of unofficial theme song, which is Dr. Wu from Steely Dan's Katy Lied album. Well, I thought that was just delicious, because having been a big Steely Dan fan myself, I seem to remember the lyrics of Dr. Wu. And so I did a little item on Sunday saying, okay, now we know that he's actually officially Dr. Wu. One wonders what kind of questions he would get, when he appears before a hearing on Capitol Hill. Are you with me, Dr. Wu? Is it really just a matter of still, I just want you, are you still high? It's like, I thought, this is just perfect, and it sort of doesn't matter if it's advances the cause of business in our times. It just seems sort of just so much fun, it was irresistible. If any of you have anything gossip about Larry Ellison, call me.
There's so much of that. You go on all day.
So again, it's just, so it's that, the hook is really useful too. Sometimes I'll get a lot of items that are sort of interesting, but they feel like maybe there'll be UFOs if I sort of stick them in the column now. So there can be actually, again, these small financial institutions that are looking to, for example, finance, get outside the traditional credit that's sort of been cut off. They've got some foundation money. They're lending money for sort of low-income housing. Now, I can just run that just as sort of an item, but if in the news that day or sort of that week, There's a lot of stuff about foreclosures and housing and more money being given to housing, and Obama talking to the banks about unfreezing credit for housing. I thought, I've got a little something that I can spin. There's an environment, there's a sort of a news ecology here, which I can sort of drop an item in that somehow, that's just a little spin, that sort of relates, that's, to the sort of the ecology of the news of that particular day or week. So I'll always look for something like that. If there's a hook that I can provide to something that otherwise is sort of just sitting there. And sometimes I'll have items that will sit, for a few weeks, and suddenly, bingo, along comes a hook, and I say, and I take it out of the larder and pop it in and slightly maybe rewrite the context a little bit. So, looking for the news hook is something I'm always looking forward to.